topic. I definitely strongly feel it's important for employers to recognize the level of impact diversity in the workplace can play. And I feel like a lot of this information is going to help you as employment counselors, help your clients get into the workforce and get past the technology that can be sort of hindering in terms of getting your resume into human hands. So I'll just give you a little bit of a description about myself. And okay, and I'm just trying to switch screens here, and I don't think I can, Melody, so I might need you to go, oh, maybe it's working now. Okay, so first of all, I'll just sort of give you a bit of a description about myself and then talk just so briefly about the company I work for alongside. So for me, I'm the marketing manager for Alongside. I've been there for about 3 years now. And prior to that, I was a PR consultant at a local agency here in Moncton. So that was quite interesting experience there. And all of that was sort of, it was funny, I just sort of fell into PR and marketing strangely after I finished my MBA. So before I got into my MBA, I went to St. Thomas University and got my degree in psychology and criminology. Psychology side was primarily focused on child development and learning. So the organization today, it's near and dear to my heart for sure. And then after that, I went to Australia to study my MBA, and then came back and ended up doing my PR diploma through the agency that I worked for, just through University of Victoria. And I'm about to pop. I'm about 37 weeks pregnant, so I should be good for today. But you might notice me being a little short of breath and everything. It's just, everything's just compressed.
We're going to try not to be bad luck, because we were bad luck that our coworker did deliver really, really soon. So we're hoping that you're okay for the webinar.
Yeah, hopefully. I should be good. I should be good. But yeah, I will get sort of short of breath. So you can't see down here, but there's a big bump there. And then just briefly on Alongside. So Alongside is we're an applicant tracking system. We were launched in 2015, and we're actually in the process of evolving into more of a full-fledged hiring platform with more of a focus on candidate experience, much more candidate-centric, not necessarily primarily being an applicant tracking system that just filters candidates and gets your jobs posted. Much more full-fledged, and it's going to be a really exciting year for the company. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be around to see it with my year mat leave, but I'll be definitely watching closely. But yeah, when we were launched in 2015, we were formerly called Kimple, and we were actually the first company selected out of Atlantic Canadian companies to go to 500 startups out in San Francisco. So that was a big opportunity for our company, and we've been growing since. And we recently actually partnered with Career Beacon about 18 months ago. So a lot of what you see with Career Beacon, I'm sure you're familiar with Career Beacon, a lot of what you see we helped create. So it's been a really exciting past 18 months for us too. So without further ado, I'm definitely going to get to the topic for you for today.
And I don't know if it's something that we should mention. I've seen a few, like you mentioned ATS. So ATS, I know you're just about to talk about it. So if you see the abbreviation ATS, it's the applicant tracking system, right?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I'll fall into that really bad. But yeah, applicant tracking system is ATS.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. And Melody, I noticed the controls. I can't seem to do anything.
Okay. Just let me know when you want to switch the slides, and I'll switch them over for you.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thanks. We can switch to the next one now.
Okay, perfect.
Perfect. Thank you, Melody. And my video just disappeared.
Oh, you had a video. Oh, I didn't see it on the slide.
It's okay. I will
Okay.
start it again, and maybe that'll work. Weird. No, my video is not there. Sorry, everybody. That's okay. You can't. You don't need to see my lovely face right now. If it does end up randomly working, then yeah, just let me know.
Okay.
So I'm going to go into applicant tracking systems now.
Okay.
So first of all, I'm going to just give you a brief description of what an applicant tracking system is. So it is a type of software that's used by companies to assist with hiring needs. It's primarily used to help them collect, organize, and filter applicants. So companies will often use an applicant tracking system to post a job online, and then that job posting online with that apply link would actually allow companies to go ahead and make it much easier for candidates to apply by just simply clicking that, uploading their resume. That gets logged into their applicant tracking system software, and then it allows them to organize and filter and communicate with applicants going forward. So the reason why an applicant tracking system was sort of created was that online job postings actually generated hundreds of applications. It was much easier for job seekers to apply. Large organizations really needed it. They had they still do have thousands of applications coming in per week. So instead of sorting through email and paper resumes, recruiters and hiring managers adopted the ATS software to keep themselves organized and efficient. So that was sort of what it is and why it was sort of formed in the first place. And we'll just go to the next slide there. So just to sort of give you just a brief description of the overall applicant tracking system process. Again, it varies for employers, but this is going to give you a really basic summary. So as it starts at the top, the job is created, and then the job is then published. This is all done online, and you can choose different channels. I see employers now using social media, using their own company website. They're posting to job boards, of course, and many more ways, and sending a link for employee referrals. It just kind of keeps going that way. So then from there, job seekers discover the job, they apply for the job, often in different ways. Certain applicant tracking systems vary. Some allow you to just upload your resume and submit super quickly. Sometimes you have to create an online profile before you upload your resume. Some of them require you to fill in some form fields to actually finalize your application. So it's very different, and every single time it's a little different. But a lot of times you can you'll see some consistencies, because a lot of larger companies tend to use similar applicant tracking systems like Taleo or iSIMS. Those are large, very powerful systems which would handle that level of applications. So then after job seekers apply, the applicants are screened. So this screening process happens both with the technology and with the employer themselves. Often the technology does that first sweep through, and you'll often see candidates or applicants are given ratings based on how well their application matched with the job description in the most basic form. And then it's also, some applicant tracking systems, you can have the setting turned on or off, but some of them will actually completely screen out resumes that don't fit, so that the employer doesn't actually even see them, which is a little unfortunate in my opinion. And then also the employer at the screening stage gets an opportunity to screen the candidates in however way they may wish to do so, and an applicant tracking system can make that process a little easier.
So when you're saying that they completely screen out some that really don't match, so are we saying, like, if they're requesting a 5-year experience, but I technically only have 3, but I qualify for everything else, it would have completely screened me out just because of that?
That wouldn't be the only reason why. Sometimes it's, say for example, you upload your resume and there's like an upload resume error, so that no data is even imported. then it'll just completely ignore it. It'll more or less give a rating in those cases if you don't necessarily have those particular qualifications. And some employers can actually rank the importance of those qualifications so that the ATS sort of knows what to track for. But for the most part, most of the applicant tracking systems I see out there today don't necessarily do that practice. There might be a few, but most of them, what ends up happening is you're more or less given a rating. So you're either given like a thumbs up or a green signal for excellent fit and a red signal for poor fit. And that can sort of impact the employer when they're screening the resume. Because they're like, oh, okay, the ATS marked this as a poor fit, but maybe they are actually a good fit, or they might be like, oh, they're not a good fit, I'm not going to pay attention to them. So that's more of the more realistic impact that can happen with an ATS nowadays, because the systems are changing. They're evolving to be much more candidate-centric.
You're learning more.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. The technology is going to evolve, and it is getting better. We've been seeing it just in the past 3 years, really. So it is quite interesting how it's evolved. So yeah, and then the next stage is interviews are conducted. So it can be phone interviews, in-person interviews. A lot of applicant tracking systems, very similar to ours actually, we're actually evolving into being more of a candidate-centric focus. So allowing companies to schedule interviews and do all of the communication with candidates straight through the applicant tracking system, as opposed to using another software like your email to actually manage the overall communication with candidates and keep on point on that. Because there are a lot of candidates out there who definitely feel like they're in the black hole and they don't get noticed. So we hope that our technology is going to help solve that issue. So then what ends up happening after interviews are conducted, or that sort of level of assessments done, you have your applicants hired. So that's just a very general process, because every employer is different. Can be background checks or psychographic testing or little tasks and all these other things that tend to happen after the screening process. So just wanted to give that quick little overview. I'm sure many of you are well aware of it, but just wanted to share that. We'll go to the next slide. So just as a quick little stat here, 75% of large companies use an ATS. That's a huge number. And one of the things that's even more interesting is even more small to medium-sized businesses are following suit. It's not necessarily a requirement for a company to have thousands of applications coming in to need an ATS. Companies that just don't want to use a spreadsheet anymore, or companies that don't necessarily have a hiring manager or a recruiter on staff, or just a small business owner that's doing the recruiting, they want something to help them manage the whole process because they're not necessarily familiar with it. So a lot of times an ATS is used, and it's going to likely continue to be used. At least a hiring platform type of software is what we're sort of envisioning for the future for employers. There's also, you'll see candidate relationship management systems out there now, not as heavily adopted, but they're definitely getting to a place where they're being adopted as well. It's just like a customer relationship management system, but for candidates. So it's really interesting technology, or the HR tech space is evolving all the time. It's very interesting. But it is really important to note that basically everyone, pretty close to everyone, are using some form of technology nowadays.
And that's specifically the reason why we wanted you here today, exactly so that we have a better picture of what's to come, because it's already started. Mm-hmm. So for every employment counselor to get into the game of the applicants are all going online now, there's no face-to-face being done or just emailing out a resume now. It's like you said, it's coming to small, medium-sized companies, not just large companies anymore. So
exactly, yeah, it's gonna be adopted across the board, and this is rapid growth too. I'll say, like, the whole HR tech space is something that has been around for years. when you look at iCIMS and Taleo and these larger applicant tracking systems, they've been around for a long time now. But the smaller ATS technology, or the smaller hiring platform technologies that are coming out, they're really looking to solve that need of really truly connecting candidates to opportunities, and using technology to actually put human back into technology. You'll often see that sort of evolution happening in the space right now. The whole humanizing hiring type thing. So it is quite a really interesting evolution, and luckily we get to see it all being part of it. So yeah, I'm happy to share any insights if anyone has any questions about that. Yeah, perfect. So we can move on to the next slide there, Melody. So one of the things I wanted to do is an applicant tracking system. I could go on and on and on about how it works, but I wanted to pick 3 specific topics or methods in terms of how applicant tracking systems work. So I'm going to go through each one of these on separate slides. So we're going to go through viewing applications, automatic rankings, and keyword searches. So in terms of viewing applications, so what ends up happening is employers can view and screen each application at a quick glance, usually in 6 seconds or less. So instead of a employer looking at a paper resume or looking at it on a PDF, they can actually view an application in more like a snippet type view. So you can actually see the candidate's name. You can see quickly where they graduated, what their last employment was. You can see all of that right on the candidate screen where you're viewing all of your candidates. So you have that, and when a resume is imported into an applicant tracking system, the highlights or the specific information such as hard skills or core skills that match with what the employer is looking for, those are highlighted right off the bat. So what this ends up doing is it makes it a lot easier for companies to actually screen resumes a lot faster, and it is usually within 6 seconds or even less. So that's the first thing that an applicant tracking system can do in terms of helping an employer. So the next one.
So within 6 seconds,
yeah,
they see basically the match of the hard skills that the applicant has.
Yes. Yeah, they can see right away. Like with our applicant tracking system, they can see any things that are matched they're highlighted in like these little green colors, and the ones that don't match are sort of grayed out. So a lot of times, like a company will put the core skills that are required in the application, and the candidate has to select those, see whether or not they have all of those, and quickly you'll be able to see if they have those skills or not, and it'll also sort of pull that information from the resume too. Yeah.
6 seconds is not a long time.
Not a long time. And people generally screen resumes really quickly. Like I've spoken to many employers who are quite proud of how quickly they can screen resumes. So this kind of makes it even faster. So it's really essential to get the best information out in front of the employer so that you're not screened out right away. That's the sort of key takeaway from that for a job seeker perspective. Yeah. And that's probably not going to change. It's going to keep going in that direction.
It's going to come down to 1 second per resume.
Pretty much, yeah. And then the next thing that this is like pretty much the core thing that an applicant tracking system does is it'll automatically compare resumes to the job description. So, so instead of reviewing every application, the recruiter can actually focus on the best match. So this is something that our applicant tracking system that it does is you can basically see right away which ones are considered excellent fits or average fits or poor fits. It's so funny. A few of the folks on this picture here actually work it alongside, and it's quite funny to see some of the poor fit ones. That's the designer who designed that, who put himself as a poor fit. So
we all tell him.
bit of a snippet into our culture. But yeah, it's quite interesting in terms of how the automatic rankings work. But a lot of it is the system will actually take the resume, pull out all of those keywords that match with the job description, and that'll determine the overall ranking that the candidate gets. So I'm going to share a few tricks to allow job seekers to actually get their resume noticed based on keywords alone. So we'll move on to the next one. And then keyword searches. So this is actually something that a lot of people kind of overlook in a way, and I just sort of wanted to highlight. When it comes down to searching, you have all of your resumes in one spot. You're viewing all of your candidates, and the employer is actually going to be wanting to sort of see, say for example, which particular skill is most important, and see if what candidates have that skill. So sorry about the screenshot, but you can sort of see like this is for a web developer job. An important skill is HTML, so they click that and they can only see candidates that have that particular skill set. So it gives them the flexibility to easily compare candidates based on skills alone. Another thing is you can actually compare based on questions asked. So many applicant tracking systems allow the employer to ask candidates questions in the application. So a simple one to explain is like, do you have a driver's license? Yes or no. If you say no, that's probably not going to show up well in an applicant tracking system, because a lot of times the employer is going to want to only see the people who answer yes. So they'll only view the yes people as opposed to the no's. So that's kind of a really simple example, but it can actually really impact your client base in terms of persons with disabilities. So that's something that an applicant tracking system does and allows employers to do. So just wanted to sort of throw that out there as a FYI.
So just on touching on the keyword searches, I know very little about the ATS system. However, I've done a little research, and when talking about the keyword searches, and you're saying how the hard skills show up a lot more in the filters and that, if the job description has, let's say, 3 years, but they wrote the number 3 instead of spelling it out, should my resume be matching that I'm inputting numbers and not spelling out the numbers?
Yeah, so that's like the level of detail that you need to pay attention to in terms of matching to the job description. Most ATS technology is smart to sort of pick up the variations of 3 written out, or 3, the number 3, but you never know exactly what system you're using when you're applying, right? So the best thing to do is to actually look at how the job description is written, and if it's written like with the number 3, use the number 3. It's that level of detail of making sure they match, you know.
Any little detail added to the resume will help the match. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's the level of matching keywords is really important, and definitely not something to be overlooked for sure.
Not to copy paste the job ad, but to make it as mirror image as possible.
Exactly. Yeah. So those are like the 3 sort of key parts of an applicant tracking system I wanted to share with you guys today. And now if we want to just hop over to the next slide, I'm just going to share with you a little bit of what this can mean for job seekers. So again, this can sort of create that potential black hole scenario where you apply but you don't hear back, and that happens a lot for people. It's a continual problem. And then we also have the resume getting a poor ranking when it doesn't deserve a poor ranking. And it also means having to rewrite the resume to be ATS friendly if it isn't already. That's a little bit about what that guy had to do here in this cartoon. So I just wanted to share that one with you. And then I'm sort of going to go through the different techniques that you can do. And sorry guys, you might hear my dog walking around out around my floor here. He's a big dog. He's like 85 pounds, so his footsteps are not very light. So that's in the background. Perfect. So yeah, if we can move on to the next slide, that would be great. Yep, there he shakes. Okay. So now we're just going to get into the top 5 ways that you can get a resume into human hands. Now, there are many ways that you can do this, but I really figured that these top 5 ways would be most fitting for you guys in terms of helping your clients.
And I also wanted to mention a conversation that I had with you yesterday that there's no foolproof 100% plan that it would get in, but these tips would help your ratio go up in terms of percentage of success to getting through the system.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So the number 1, which I've sort of chatted a little bit about already, is pay attention to resume formatting. So the key thing is to keep it simple. There's actually ATS-friendly templates out there. If you just Google ATS template or ATS-friendly template, you can actually find some templates for resumes that are super simple, and they're actually designed to be better read by an applicant tracking system. One of the things I'll keep saying too in terms of keep it simple is a lot of applicant tracking systems will only really you don't want to make it hard for an applicant tracking system to read the resume. So if your resume has a bunch of pictures or columns or tables, it's going to get it confused, and what's going to happen is it's going to change the overall flow of how it absorbs the information. So you need to keep section headings simple. So for example, if you want to have, like, you keep with the simple headings of work experience, education, those types of things, instead of having like a headline like research and leadership, for example, because an applicant tracking system isn't necessarily going to know what that means, and it's not going to sort the information in a way that you want it to be presented. Now, I'll note too, a lot of applicant tracking systems show the original resume, so you can always upload a fancier version of the resume as an attachment instead of having that be the only way to sort of view. So some people are really, really adamant, like I'm like this, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, I want it to look pretty and all of those things.
And I was just about to ask that, because I'm from a marketing background, you're from a marketing background. So when you said that, keep it simple, the design and things like that, so basically they upload a very simple one, and then you can attach your actual original looking.
Yeah, there are a lot of applicant tracking systems that allow you to attach additional files. Okay. So definitely do that if you can. You know, even attaching a version of your cover letter or portfolio. Some of them allow you to add a link to like an online project you did. Like, it really depends, but most of the time you do have the opportunity to add additional attachments that won't necessarily impact the scoring of your resume. But yeah, you got to keep it simple.
And I know that I see it on your screen that you haven't written there, and it was a question that I had. PDF versus docs. Do they read well, the PDFs?
They do. They do.
Okay.
A PDF is, I tend to default to PDF for any, I would suggest PDF is the best version. DocX is good too. You just don't want to get into like you don't want to upload like a PNG file, like a image file of your resume, because it's not going to even import anything, you know. You want to actually have it saved as something that can actually read the words. Okay. And an ATS reads a resume line by line from left to right. So if you have a lot of columns or tables or even special character bullets, like not just the dot bullets, but the little arrow ones or the, you know, the squares, like don't do any of those special character bullets. Just do simple bullet if you need bullets, or even dashes are great too. So yeah, it's really interesting how you sort of need to avoid those special characters that make it look nice.
It's almost hard to hear that, because we've always been told that make sure your resume looks professional and clean and make it noticeable, make it pop out.
Yeah.
And now these new systems are coming up and we have to go back to line by line, left to right. And
it is really funny. But yeah, you even have like an ETS friendly version of your resume, and then have a nicer version if you really need it for the job, you know, because depending on the job, you kind of need to show your creativity, right? So but for the most part, it's the keep it simple is the really big piece of advice here. So yeah, as you're helping your clients go through their resumes, sort of keep this as like a bit of a checklist for yourself to sort of go through, I suggest, just to sort of help sort of make sure that the formatting isn't going to throw anything off. Yeah, so we'll go on to the next one there. Now focusing on keywords, that's the number 2. And we've chatted a little bit about this as well, but keywords rank a resume's relevance. So if you actually use the exact keywords from the job description, you're going to be more likely to get noticed in terms of the applicant tracking system rankings. So it is really important also to avoid common buzzwords. So if you get too crafty with how you word things, you're going to confuse the software. So again, down to the sort of keep it simple idea. And also be sure to include hard skills. So hard skills, and there's a whole hard skills versus soft skills, not debate, but it's more of like a discussion. There are companies that are more apt to look for soft skills in candidates nowadays. It's more from a screening, like a human screening perspective, where employers are more looking for soft skills. But an applicant tracking system may not necessarily pick up soft skills. So you need to make sure that you include the hard skills that you have in the resume, ideally having them match the exact keywords for what's actually in the job description. And another sort of piece of advice, which actually is something that's funny that our applicant tracking system or our technology does, is gives candidates the opportunity to actually submit a highlight section where they actually have to, it's an open form box, they need to write in, it's optional, they don't need to, but put in a section that really highlights more about them, so that ends up showing up in the snippet that employers review. So, but it is really important, just by default, always have a qualification summary at the top of the resume that really highlights this relevant skills for that specific position. So the whole idea of having one resume for multiple jobs is not good practice, and I'm sure many of you know this already. The job description has to be reflected in the actual resume. And one thing I'll note too, it's not a good idea to pull tricks with it. You may have clients who might want to get really crafty and throw in keywords and then make it all white text, so it's hidden. That might trick the ATS, and it might give you a good ranking, but it's going to leave a sour taste in the employer's mouth when they sort of look at your original resume and don't see the actual skills. So
I've actually never heard about that.
Yeah, people do that.
The whiteout words.
Just to white out words, and then you don't necessarily see them, but the ATS sees them. So not really recommended though, but it has happened, so we've seen it. Yeah, so that's the keywords part. We'll go into tip number 3. Which is include attachments, kind of what I was saying earlier. So often at the application stage, you're asked to include any relevant attachments. So don't skip the step and actually do this. What we find when we are actually screening applications for our own company, we love it when candidates include a cover letter. I think most employers do. Especially if it's a really thoughtful cover letter that has, and it's okay for length. It's okay if it's like a big, massive page of text. That's fine. It gives us a really good idea that the candidate put a lot of effort into applying for the job, and it wasn't just a sort of just apply everywhere and hope to see if something bites. So I feel like that's something that can really sort of help get the human attention out of an applicant tracking system.
So the cover letter, at what point, so the cover letter doesn't like it doesn't get scanned through the ATS. It actually just, once you're past like the excellent part, then the human part comes in where they would actually pull it out all your attachments.
For the most part, it actually kind of depends on the applicant tracking system itself in terms of how it's set up. Some of them do screen the cover letter, so it is important to sort of keep those key relevant keywords, just as you did in your resume, noted in the cover letter too. So, because it's hard to say how that specific technology works for the certain job you're applying for. Yeah, it's sometimes you can actually include it as an extra attachment if you want to, if you have like a pretty cover letter or so to speak. Yeah, so it really depends on the technology itself. So, but either way, always make sure the keywords match. Make sure it's written in a way that's line by line from left to right, and just be as clear and concise and personal as possible in that cover letter.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, and I say I actually said, yeah, the ATS will not parse these documents. I mainly mean like when you add an attachment, most of the time they don't actually go through and parse those. So yeah, so if you're uploading a portfolio or anything like that, it's not necessarily going to be parsed, but it's all this additional information. I know for us within our system, when we see an application that has a cover letter and has these attachments, it has links to their social media profiles, tells us, oh, it's okay to check out this person if they're comfortable with it. You know, all of those things sort of gives the employer permission to learn more about the candidate, as opposed to just basing opinions solely on the resume. You don't necessarily want to make your full decision just on the resume. So anything you can add additionally is going to get more human attention. I think it's sort of human nature for us to want to learn more about candidates in a way. Yeah, so then number 4, on to mindfully answering questions. So it is something that many applicant tracking systems have, but at the application stage, most of them allow the employer to ask candidates questions. So really look at these questions as a chance to stand out above the rest. In terms of the question types, a lot of them have multiple choice, yes, no, so you can't really like put much extra effort into that, but little times employers want to ask some short answer questions or long answer questions just to sort of discover a little bit more about you. So it'll give the recruiter and hiring manager the ability to actually assess you on a more personal level as opposed to the resume. I've even seen some applications. There's a company called Typeform. They do Typeforms. They do surveys. It's a worldwide company, but they're actually quite interesting. They use their own technology, Typeform, to actually have candidates apply. So their application method is just asking questions. There's no need to upload a resume if you don't want to. You have the choice at the end, but it's basically like just answer these questions and we want to learn more about you. So we're more and more seeing companies like that who are just wanting to sort of learn more about the applicants as opposed to just deciding whether or not they're a fit based on a piece of paper or a PDF on the screen or what an ATS tends to show them. So that's number 4. And then on to number 5 is use social networks. You know, I remember my father telling me as a kid, and I was like 15 years old, first applying for jobs. He's like, apply for 30 jobs a day, show up, drop off your resume, call them, do everything you can to get noticed. And it's still sort of the same, but we actually have a more of an advantage of actually using social networks to learn more or to sort of get noticed a bit more. So obviously apply for the job first, and then what you can do is you can find the official website, look for someone in the division you want to join, typically on the About Us page. And if their email address is there, then yay, bonus, awesome, you don't have to search for it. And just write them a friendly email. I've actually got this myself, being a marketing manager at Alongside. we'll actually have candidates that apply, and they'll actually reach out to me and be like, hey, I just applied for your position, looking forward to working with you, or looking forward to learning more about your company, yada yada. And that really does get you a little bit more notice by from an actual human. Another idea is to sort of look for mutual connections on Facebook or LinkedIn. So if you're lucky, you could actually ask a friend to introduce you. We're kind of lucky here in New Brunswick that we can, we're a smaller province, and a lot of times there can be some mutual connections there. So it is an opportunity to sort of reach out and use your network that way. I don't necessarily recommend trying to be someone's friend on Facebook that you want to get their attention to. Facebook is more of a personal network. LinkedIn, you can try and connect with them for sure, more of a professional network, but Facebook, I'd probably hesitate against just sort of adding them as a friend randomly. I don't think that would work too well. Also, become a fan, member, follower of the company and their social channels. Most of the time what happens is you're able to actually get noticed by being someone who's actually engaging and interacting with their posts, because say if you are applying for a marketing position, the head of marketing or anyone in marketing managing social media, they're going to see, oh, this person's really liking our stuff. And then they end up exploring them and then discovering, oh, this person actually applied for a job. So it's just a way to sort of get a bit more engaged with what the company is up to.
And you're basically branding your name too.
Exactly. Yeah, you're branding yourself for sure.
Yeah,
totally.
you're selling your name to the company where, I don't know, you might have not made it to the top 2 rankings, but they'll search the system for you now because they're seeing your name so much, right?
Exactly. It does definitely help. Yeah. And it is definitely, and it's natural. It's not like it's like an awkward thing to do. And it's just, it's more what those social networks are set up to do. So I would definitely recommend doing that. And it does signal to the company that you're really interested in working at that company, not just wanting to just fill that role that they have. That can actually be a bit of a soft skill type of comparison between when it comes down to screening candidates from a human point of view. And if you see a job on Twitter, this is actually a little trick. A lot of times companies use Twitter to post their jobs. You can actually contact the page administrator. A lot of times on Twitter, it'll have in the little bio, the company bio, it'll say like managed by or run by, and it'll have a link to the person who's running that Twitter account. You can do that, and you can ask them who the recruiter or hiring manager is, and then you can actually reach out to that person directly. So that's another little way you can kind of get into finding out who's the best person to talk to. Because again, especially when you're applying for something, you're just clicking an apply link. You don't know who it's going to. So doing that extra research to try and figure out who is likely going to be the person to be reading your resume really goes that extra mile. Yeah.
And I find it kind of takes away the feeling of you mentioned a while ago of you're in a black hole. You don't know where you just sent your resume. Did someone see it? Was it clicked on? It kind of just gives you that extra satisfaction that, okay, I sent in a reminder that I applied, so maybe they'll check out to see if my resume is there, and I don't feel like I'm alone in the universe and just floating into space there.
Exactly. And it really does signal to employers that you're really interested in their company, and at least gets you in for that first interview where you can be face-to-face, and you can, or even just a phone interview so the company can learn more about you. It's all about getting past the technology and into that human interaction, and just sort of overcoming those sort of levels of, or more hurdles, I should say, that technology can unfortunately create. That's probably not going to go away because it does make an employer's job a lot easier. So yeah, it's one of those things. So I think that's all 5 of the tips that I have for you today. I would love to go through any takeaways anyone might have. I don't know, Melody, if we want to sort of open up Q&A or if you've had some questions come in, or if there's anyone who wants to sort of share what their number one takeaway is from this presentation. It'd be really, really great to sort of see overall what you thought of the content and whether or not there was certain bits that were really helpful for you today.
So everything is open. The Q&A has been open in the chat as well. I usually do have a very shy group all the time, so
no worries.
But I had a quick question. It might sound stupid, I don't know. If it's a job that's posted and it says that you have to send your resume through email, so if I'm sending it through an email, it's actually going to someone's email address. Would they then put it through an ATS system?
Typically not. Okay. Most of the time they don't actually have an ATS, and they're just managing everything through spreadsheet or through whatever other means. But most of the time they're not doing that. Okay. You might have some who will upload a resume after. What ends up happening is when employers, like often we'll have some employers who will upload resumes because some people just decide to apply via email instead of the ATS. And then they go ahead and upload it. What ends up happening is we actually get some stuff missed because maybe there was questions that the employer wanted to ask that are not answered once it's uploaded. So you tend to sort of miss out in a way if you don't apply via the ATS, because that can kind of impact the overall filtering in terms of if there were questions involved or if there's any other additional information required in addition to the resume.
Okay. Yeah. And this might be a question that's on some of the people's mind is we always talk about disclosure, if they're disclosing their disability or not. So let's say that I would be disclosing my disability on my resume. Would an ATS system see that somewhere?
Not necessarily. Like it
wouldn't pop up in the snippet or something.
No. Okay. It would more. The only thing that might happen is it's just going to show if there's been a while since they were employed, for example, like it might just show like a gap in employment type thing, or I'm just throwing out certain scenarios that it could sort of flag, because sometimes they'll show like a timeline of employment and whatnot. Okay. But for the most part, it's pretty much focused on those sort of key things like work experience, education, location. That's about it for those sort of snippets. And sometimes work history in terms of like a timeline, because sometimes employers look for like job hoppers in a way. That would be one of the reasons why something like that would exist. Yeah.
So if they see that you have a pattern every year, you've been switching job after a year.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like, for the amount of money that a company invests into hiring and training and everything, they want to make sure that they're going to be hiring someone who's more of a long-term commitment. Yeah. So they tend to sort of look at timelines from that perspective. And sometimes it can be like sort of raised like, oh, okay, I wonder why they weren't employed for these past few years. But that normally doesn't turn off someone from wanting to interview that person, especially if their resume sort of ranked well in terms of keyword matching and everything else. Like if the signal is a green signal, but they haven't been employed in a while, it's still worthwhile to bring them in for an interview type thing. Yeah.
Because you never know what the history is there, right? So
you never know. And you can't make any assumptions at all. So that's like big faux pas.
And that's good to hear that NATS would see it like that. And they would measure more on the hard skill than they would on the work experience term, because that's one of the biggest issues that I see that employment counselors have sometimes, is that they do have work gaps depending on the disability that they had. Yes. So it's nice to hear that an ATS would actually not oversee it, but that the skills would come up first before seeing that. So.
Yeah. The rating or the ranking is purely based on the matching of the words and the matching, and the formatting and everything else of those other factors. But it's not going to. It ends up being more onto the human to sort of make those calls. Yeah. So, and if you have a higher rating, then I would sort of assume that the human would be a bit more apt to look at the resume and look at it in a bit more detail.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So would anyone have any questions that you would ask, or no?
That's
We do
okay.
always have a very shy group.
That's okay. If there's any questions after, Melody, you can feel free to, it probably makes sense for everyone to email you.
Sure.
And I can obviously give you my contact details, and people can reach out to me one-on-one. I am, again, 37 weeks pregnant, so the time is ticking. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to send them through to Melody, and I can get back as soon as possible, or one of my colleagues could if I'm obviously not available. You don't want my answers when I'm sleep deprived. Yeah, so overall, I think it was a really fun topic to share.
Yes, it's a very interesting topic, I find, because everything is going towards technology, right?
Yes.
So if we can try to keep up with it as most as we can, then we can help out our clients that are trying to navigate through the job seeking part.
Exactly. Yeah. Any help there, we're definitely there. Our company itself has always been number one for us is supporting job seekers and supporting the that end of hiring, not only just being employer centric, but actually focusing on candidates, focusing on their experience. So any opportunity we can do to sort of provide information to help employment counselors such as yourselves help job seekers, then by all means, it's something that we're quite passionate about, not just myself, company-wide. So, yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Emily, for accepting to come present on this topic for us today. And again, as mentioned, we will be posting the recording on our website and as well as our YouTube channel, so you guys can share with your colleagues that weren't able to attend today. So
perfect. And I apologize for my video not working. I have it set up, but I don't know why it wasn't working. But hopefully, I see most everyone's still there, so we didn't lose engagement based on no one seeing my face.
No.
Okay. All right.
Perfect.
Well, thanks so much for having me. And again, any questions, feel free to pop them our way.